Looking at these numbers, what comes to your mind? This is not random data. They're the results of the Volkswagen scandal. Specifically, 11 million cars had cheating software installed, 32 million euros in compensation, 1,200 people died, 7 years in prison for a senior executive. But why did Volkswagen do this? Imagine you're an American citizen living in California in 2009. At that time, the whole state was experiencing extreme weather. More than 9,000 wildfires caused heavy smoke that lasted for weeks. Reservoirs dried up after 3 straight years of drought, and the average temperature kept rising. Climate change filled the evening news, making you start thinking about protecting the environment. You began to consider changing the car you drive every day. At first, you thought about electric cars, but back then Tesla only had the Roadster model, which cost more than $100,000. There was also no proof that the car was good. In fact, it had many issues. Over 300 cars were recalled in the first year. So you switched to hybrid cars, which use both gas and electricity. The most popular one at the time was the Toyota Prius, but the driving experience wasn't great. The engine responded slowly, and the car wasn't really attractive. While you were still unsure, a new option showed up. Volkswagen, one of the most trusted car companies from Germany, was known for its small, durable cars with a strong European design. At that time, they brought a new promise to the US market: diesel cars that were just as clean as hybrids. In other words, Volkswagen's clean diesel cars could save fuel, protect the environment, and still feel great to drive. So why wouldn't you buy one right away? To you, it was just a car. But to Volkswagen, clean diesel was the key to something much bigger. In 2007, Martin Winterkorn became the CEO. His goal was to make Volkswagen the #1 car company in the world, beating Toyota in sales. He wanted to sell over 10 million cars each year and saw the US market as the key to reaching that goal. But Americans mainly liked gas cars. Diesel cars only made up about 5% of the market. That's why clean diesel was supposed to be the game changer. But from a technical point of view, Volkswagen faced a nearly insurmountable challenge. Diesel engines are strong and fuel efficient, but they have a big problem. They produce much more nitrogen oxide than gas engines. Nitrogen oxide is a dangerous gas that causes serious air pollution. It creates smog and can lead to chronic breathing problems. In Europe, where emission rules were still quite loose, diesel cars like this could be sold widely without much legal trouble. But in the US, especially in California, the emission rules were as strict as a firewall, keeping diesel cars out of the market. To sell diesel cars in the US, Volkswagen had to solve the emission problem. They put a huge pressure on the engineers. At one point, they thought about working with Daimler to use urea technology. This system sprays a special liquid to reduce NOx emissions. But after discussions, CEO Winterkorn rejected the idea. He said the system was too expensive and complex. It didn't match the company's plan to expand. Instead, he told the engineers to find their own miracle. Under Winterkorn's leadership, Volkswagen was run with a culture of control and fear. Goals were given from the top like orders. There was no room for negotiation or change. Once a goal was set, it had to be achieved at all costs. A former expert who worked with Winterkorn said, before anyone reports to him, they make sure they have good news. When engineers got the task for diesel cars, one of them said, "We don't have the technology to accomplish this." The reply wasn't support or a meeting. It was a cold sentence. Maybe it is time I get another engineer. In this kind of environment, the engineers knew if they wanted to keep their jobs, they had to finish the task, even if it meant cheating. And then they found a solution. They added a special line of code into the engine software. This code was programmed to recognize when the car was being tested in a lab. Then it would automatically adjust the system to lower the emissions and pass the test. This software was made by Bosch, a longtime partner of Volkswagen. But Bosch said it was only made for internal testing. In fact, in 2007, Bosch sent a warning letter. They said using this software in cars sold to customers was illegal. But the engineers at Volkswagen didn't care. They would rather cheat than lose their jobs. That doesn't mean the CEO was innocent. There was a secret meeting held to discuss the software issue in the US. The report clearly showed a big difference between lab and real-world emissions. That report was sent to Winterkorn's desk. Nobody knows how thoroughly he read it, but one thing is sure, he received the information. However, no action was taken, no internal investigation, no sales stopped, no warnings given. Winterkorn chose silence. In that stressful environment, a dangerous way of thinking started to grow inside Volkswagen. People began to justify cheating. Some told themselves, "We're not the first company to do this." And that's true. In the past, the car industry had similar cases. Even Volkswagen in the 1970s used a cheating device to get past new US emission rules. They were fined only $120,000. That amount was tiny compared to their sales. So maybe, if they got caught again, it wouldn't be a big deal. Over time, nobody saw it as a moral mistake anymore. It became just a technical challenge, a business decision, a problem to solve. Three things: top-down pressure, a tech loophole, and internal justification formed a dangerous triangle. Crossing the moral line was no longer rare, it became almost certain. But for many years, nobody knew. Volkswagen launched big marketing campaigns. They even bought Super Bowl ads to promote their eco-friendly cars. In the US, VW's clean diesel cars sold like hotcakes. Over 500,000 were sold in just a few years. CEO Martin Winterkorn was full of pride. In early 2008, he announced a 10-year plan: triple Volkswagen's US sales by 2018. Then, use that to beat General Motors and Toyota to become the world's top car maker. Clean diesel was the foundation of that plan, and up until mid-2015, everything seemed on track. Even though Volkswagen had built a perfect cheating setup, with smart software and a silent team, the truth can't stay hidden forever. The exposure of the biggest scandal in the history of the auto industry didn't start with a large investigation, but a small, independent study that cost only $70,000. In 2013, the International Council on Clean Transportation, or ICCT, wanted to find the answer to a strange contradiction. Volkswagen cars were criticized for pollution in Europe, but in the US, where the standards are even stricter, the cars looked perfectly clean on paper. That made no sense. So the ICCT, along with West Virginia University, tested real road emissions of some diesel cars, including the Jetta, the Beetle, and a BMW X5 xDri 35D. The results shocked them. The Jetta emitted 15 to 35 times more NOx than allowed. The Beetle was also bad, over 20 times the limit. The BMW X5 diesel, meanwhile, met emission standards most of the time, only failing in some steep uphill conditions. This showed that the problem wasn't with diesel technology, it was with Volkswagen. These results completely went against what Volkswagen claimed. Instead of staying silent, the research group sent their full report to the US Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, and the California Air Resources Board in early 2015. The authorities immediately stepped in. They ran their own tests and confirmed the findings. Volkswagen's real-world NOx emissions were way above legal limits. At first, Volkswagen denied it. They gave excuses, saying it was a technical error, a faulty sensor, or bad testing conditions. They even secretly recalled thousands of cars to update the software. But after the update, emissions stayed the same. This lack of cooperation made the two agencies even more suspicious. The investigation was expanded across the US and then globally. By September 2015, running out of patience, the EPA officially sent a notice of violation of Volkswagen. In this letter, they accused the company of intentionally installing cheating software in hundreds of thousands of diesel cars between 2009 and 2015 to bypass US emission laws. On September 18, 2015, the accusation was made public. Immediately, Volkswagen's stock price crashed. On September 21, 2015, the company lost 15 billion euros in market value, about 1/4 of its total worth. It wasn't just a financial shock, it hit German technological pride hard. The German government feared that the entire auto industry as a national symbol could lose its reputation. Still, a survey in October 2015 showed that most Germans supported Volkswagen. Almost 2/3 of people said the scandal was being exaggerated. But in other countries, trust was already collapsing. The global media reported it non-stop. The public was angry. Governments launched their own investigations. Under pressure, VW's leaders had to respond. But instead of admitting system-wide failure, they blamed lower-level employees. Their first statement said, "A small group of engineers acted improperly. Management knew nothing about it." This kind of response wasn't new. Other companies had used the same tactic, cutting off blame and sacrificing a few people to protect the top. Volkswagen claimed that a group of software engineers acted on their own. They added the cheating code without review, supervision, and budget approval. But there were many signs that this excuse wasn't true. First, the cheating software was complex. To design, test, and integrate a code that could detect emission tests and adjust engine behavior would require many departments: software engineers, mechanical engineers, testers, product managers, and most importantly, approval from higher levels. Second, Bosch had warned Volkswagen in writing back in 2007. They said this software must not be used in commercial cars because of legal risks, but the warning was ignored for 8 years. Finally, Winterkorn was known for strict control. Inside VW, people said, "Nothing escapes his eyes." It was hard to believe that someone like him didn't know about something that could affect the company's future. Over time, authorities and the media began to doubt Volkswagen's explanation. Investigators found internal emails, meeting notes, and technical documents showing that this wasn't the action of a few rogue workers. It was an organized plan, lasting many years. Some mid-level managers even raised concerns about risk, but were told to stay quiet or removed to other departments. Under huge pressure from US authorities and the media, Volkswagen was forced to admit the truth. They had installed illegal software in about 11 million vehicles worldwide. The scandal officially broke. At first, CEO Martin Winterkorn said he would stay and try to win back trust, but pressure from the government, investors, and the public was too strong. He resigned a few days later. Desperate, Volkswagen tried to calm people down. They promised to recall and fix all affected cars by 2016, but in reality, the process took many more years. Pleading guilty wasn't the end of their troubles. First came the money. Volkswagen had to spend more than $33 billion to deal with the crisis. Criminal fines, civil lawsuits, and vehicle recalls. In the US, car owners had two choices: sell their cars back at high prices, or keep them and get cash. Some people received up to $44,000. The total compensation amount was a staggering $14.7 billion. VW also had to spend $2 billion building an electric car charging network. This later became Electrify America, part of their effort to calm public anger. On top of that, VW faced 3 federal felonies, a $2.8 billion criminal fine, and $1.5 billion in civil penalties. In the US alone, fines total over $20 billion. In Germany, VW faced a class action lawsuit from 200,000 plaintiffs and paid 620 million euros. In the UK, they paid £193 million to over 91,000 people. In Australia, they were fined $125 million. In Canada, they paid another $1.6 billion. The list went on and on. In total, VW had to pay more than $30 billion in fines, settlements, and repair costs around the world. It became the most expensive scandal in auto industry history. But money wasn't the only problem. This was a legal earthquake. Top managers had to face court. Oliver Schmidt, VW's environment manager in the US, was sentenced to a 7-year imprisonment and a $400,000 fine. James Liang, a software engineer, got 40 months in prison. Rupert Stadler, a senior executive at VW, received a 21-month suspended sentence and a €1.1 million fine. Even Martin Winterkorn, the former CEO, was charged in both the US and Germany with conspiracy and market manipulation. The damage didn't stop there. Diesel car sales dropped sharply. Trust in the brand collapsed in major markets like the US, UK, and Australia. Many customers no longer saw Volkswagen as a symbol of German engineering, but as a symbol of organized cheating. VW lost its leadership in clean car technology. They had destroyed the green image they once promoted. Independent studies showed that the extra NOx emissions from these cheating cars likely caused at least 60 early deaths in the US, 1,200 in Europe, and up to 38,000 worldwide in 2015 alone. This wasn't just breaking the law, it was a crime against public health and the environment. The Volkswagen scandal wasn't just a lesson for one company. It tore off the shiny paint that the whole auto industry had worked hard to polish. For years, car makers raced to meet stricter emission rules, but instead of real innovation, many secretly tried to cheat the system. VW was just the first to get caught. Other major car brands also came under suspicion, including BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Fiat Chrysler, and Renault. Some were found using tricks to improve emission test results. Governments began to rethink how emissions should be tested. The US increased regular inspections and raised penalties. The EU replaced lab tests with real road driving tests. China pushed faster towards electric vehicles and cut support for gasoline cars. From then on, clean car technology wasn't a choice, it was survival. From Volkswagen's fall, the entire auto industry faced a decision: be more transparent about green tech or be left behind. And Volkswagen, not only did it lose $30 billion, but also a position that took decades to consolidate.